So in case you're interested, this is what we're doing next, okay? You have that book or something that looks something like that book. That's what we're going to do. And probably, as I said, after that, we'll have an exam. But we're not there yet, as you see. So you can kind of figure what the time will look like as we coast up to that time. So plan your work accordingly and pace yourself like that. So let's see if we can go through and dispose of Don Juan here, Don Juan in hell, Don Juan in Sonora. So let's see where we were. We were talking about these AIDS type things, I think. I don't know exactly where we left off, but we were somewhere, let's see. For instance, talking on page 35, the weed is only equal power. I think we went through all of that. Mushrooms on 51. I think we got up to there, didn't we? Somewhere like that? Finish that? Yeah, I'm working up to the expedition into the nowhere, into no man's land. I'm trying to see where we left off here. Well, we're in 53, he's talking about becoming a man of knowledge. So he sees this as an enlightenment process. And I guess that's about where we got to. Defeating 4 natural enemies, whoever these enemies are, this man of knowledge. First he vanquishes fear on 54. Now, it's interesting. If you look at the Bhagavad Gita, which is a handbook of Hindu religious activity or insight or inspiration, you'll find language very similar to this. The only difference in the end is that these people are using hallucinatory vegetation of different kinds. Nothing from animal life, all from vegetable life, to aid them or to produce this state that they are speaking about. But other than that, I think you'll see that it's very, very similar in terms of what the goals are, which shows something about ancient history of human beings and mankind, or the womankind, or the species of men and women. They're all seem to be looking for the same thing: some power in their own life, some ability to ward off what are looked upon as evil forces, evil spirits, usually sickness, and some ability to bear the situation that they're in and to proceed without fear. So these things are pretty, I think, universal and don't really stop at a border or a given civilization. Talking about the man who is defeated. His second enemy, it speaks about not dying here. Who doesn't die at this point? What becomes of a man who is defeated? Does he die? And I don't know why he does or doesn't die, but the second enemy is of trying to become a man of knowledge and not become a clown is, it seems to me, again, I don't follow this. Darkness and fear again. So, again, I'm not sure what these enemies, this isn't very consistent. He will know at this point the power he's been pursuing for so long is finally his. He can do with it whatever he pleases. His allies at his command, his wishes, his rule. Anyway, it's power. And losing power, how does he lose power? And his enemies finally defeat him. Anyway, all this is very confusing to me. If you can make any sense out of that particular lecture, please do. What's the third enemy? This seems to be, second enemy seems to be fear. gets control over himself, just like Hinduism. And he knows how to use his power, then he defeats his third enemy, whatever that one is. And the fourth enemy, I can understand, old age. That is clearly something that creeps up on all of us. Yeah?
I may be wrong, but from what I got from it, I got that the enemies were fear, clarity, power, and old age.
Okay, well that's better. You've read it more closely than I have and more recently. So fear is the first one. What's the second one?
Clarity.
He doesn't want clarity, he does want clarity.
It's almost as backwards. It's thinking that you have too much, and that you're away from getting further, something like that.
Oh, that's a good point, yeah. People who are smug in their knowledge, people who think that they know everything, that they're already full of clarity, will defeat themselves from becoming more clear, in other words. So it's a kind of overconfidence, smugness, lack of desire to continue getting greater insight, basically. And the third one you said was?
Power.
What's the problem with power? Power turns against itself?
Yeah, and I think he also discussed letting something have power over you, or
Doing
being
something
too
else.
involved in something such as, and later in the book, like the ginseng weed, letting that control you, and the powers that attention.
A lot of, for instance, addicts get the things take over them and they become dependent. The power itself dominates them, not them the power. Yeah, well, I think we can all understand that. There's you say, well, it's a lesson for me. Well, we're not trying. This is not church here. We're not trying to give you a lesson in life. But if there's a lesson to be gotten out of this, these are the kinds of things that he's trying to disseminate, isn't it? And the third one then is old age. Let's see what we can see what he says about old age. Or rather, the fourth one is old age. So at the end of your journey of learning, without warning, you know, old age creeps up on you. It's the cruelest one, as most of us may imagine. And I think everyone knows that that's going to be tough whenever they come up to it. There's very few who do a good job on that one. But when a man has no fear, that sounds just like the Bhagavad Gita now. In fact, I could just transfer this into the Bhagavad Gita to sound the same writing. It sounds exactly the same. No more impatient clarity of mind, a time when all his power is in check. It's also a time when he has unyielding desire to rest. He gives totally to his desire to live down, forget, soothes himself in his tiredness. His desire to retreat will overrule all his clarity, his power, and his knowledge. But if a man bluffs off his tiredness, lives his fate through, he can then be called a man of knowledge. Only for a brief moment, when he succeeds in fighting off his last invincible enemy, the moment of clarity, power, and knowledge is enough. Well, that's a hopeful thought. Would it were true? Would people who were able to do that? But it's true. I mean, when you do see old people who have achieved this state and are not like reduced by age to, you know, a miserable condition, but have kept their dignity and the clarity of their mind and things like that, it is an impressive sight. You say, well, what's the point? You're going to all meet the same fate anyway. I think these things are a matter of, I've often told my students from my point of view, a matter of taste. How you want to live, you know, how you want to appear in your life. Whether you want your life to look like something elegant and dignified, or you want your life to look like a cesspool, basically. It's just a matter of taste, how you choose to live on an aesthetic level. Aesthetics means what you consider to be beautiful and what you consider to be ugly or loved. People don't reckon that in often enough in people's behavior. People think that you need a God to tell you how to behave rightly. Personally, I don't think you need anything like that. All you do, and I don't think ancient men or women needed these things in order to know what high behavior was as opposed to low behavior. We have a natural instinct in us. It's nothing to do with a God or anything that puts it there. This is the way human beings are. And you either respect them, you can have a total pagan or anyone else, Christian, non-Christian, Buddhist, Jew, whatever, behaving in an elegant, impressive way or a low manner. You can have people lopping off people's heads And you know that that's cowardice. Take a defenseless, innocent person and make them sit and grovel and beg before you. So you don't have to have a religious training to know that. It's innate. Even on a football field, people know the difference between someone who's behaving in an admirable way or not. And it goes through life. So to my mind, these things are aesthetics and they go right up to your old age. You can choose to face these challenges in a high-minded, he puts here, clear-minded way, or you can choose to be reduced by them. And I think most people, if they have their brothers, would like to do it the first way. So I think these things help fine, but whatever helps you to do it. But maybe that's the best we can do in life. My sermon for the day. Let's go on here now to, I think we're going to come in here to his expedition here. They're still talking in December here about the devil's weed, which supposedly have to do with living properly. Mescalito as a protector, January. So is he a god? 59, and the only god, or is he one of the gods? He's just a protector and a teacher. He is power. He's not a god. He's not anything else. Why don't you tell me more about Mescalito? I can't tell you anymore. There must be thousands of things to say. No, there's nothing you have to know. As I've already told you, he's not the same for everyone. Well, we've heard this before. So let's see, where does this expedition begin? I think it's on page 60, is it there? Friday, July 6, 1962, is that when he goes out? I think it is. So we could just talk about this, but I think his description of this search for Mescalito is the high point of the book. I don't know, we've been looking at it, and I don't consider this a great book necessarily, though you might like it, and it may be pretty good as far as you're concerned, and I'm not against your liking what you read. Don Juan and I started our trip in the afternoon of Saturday, June 23rd. So you see, he's writing this down 3 weeks later, or 2 weeks later anyway. We were going to look for unguitos. Who's Spanish here? How do you pronounce unguito? Is that right? How do you say it? Unguito? Unguito. You don't put the S on the end of it, or you do? Unguitos. Okay, you say it. Unguitos. Hey, God, I'm getting to be a Spanish speaker here. Unguitos. Okay. Now I know how to go into one of those places and order something, huh? Give me some, how do you say, fried mushrooms.
Yeah, there's that.
We arrived in a little mining town, northern Chihuahua, at 10 p.m. on Wednesday. We walked from the place. I had parked the car to the outskirts of town at the house of friends. Taramara Indian and his wife. And the next morning, we woke about 5 in the morning. He brought us some gruel. We sat down and talked to Don Juan. After breakfast, the man put water in my canteen and 2 sweet rolls in my knapsack. Don Juan handed me the canteen, fixed the knapsack. He's going to go hiking with Don Juan. We climbed gentle slopes. We reached the steeper inclines. Despite his advanced age, Don Juan kept up the pace, and he's pretty fit, apparently. So we were going real fast. By midday, I was completely exhausted, and he opened the bread sack. We sat down. You can eat all of it if you want, he said. How about you? No, I'm not hungry. We won't need this food later on. So Don Juan's already being very portentous and confident. I was tired and hungry, and I think Castaneda does a good job here. Are we going to stay here a long time? We're here to gather some mescalito. We'll stay until tomorrow. Where is mescalito? He's all around us. Cacti of many species were growing on profusion all through the area, but I could not distinguish peyote among them. We started to hike again, and by 3 o'clock we came to a long, narrow valley with steep side hills. I felt strangely excited at the idea of finding peyote, which I had never seen in its natural environment. We entered the valley and must have walked about 400 feet when suddenly I spotted 3 unmistakable peyote plants. They were a cluster a few inches above the ground in front of me to the left of the path. They looked like round, pulpy green roses. I ran towards them, pointing them out to Don Juan. He ignored me as usual. Deliberately kept his back turned as he walked away. I know I had done something wrong. For the rest of the afternoon, we walked in silence, moving slowly on the flat floor. It's a good description, isn't it? That's what I'm reading for you. Which was covered with small, sharp-edged rocks. We moved along the cacti, disturbing crowds of lizards, and at times a solitary bird, and I passed scores of peyote plants without saying a word. At 6 o'clock, the end of the day, we're at the bottom of the mountains that mark the end of the valley. We climbed up to a ledge. Don Juan dropped his sack and sat down. I was hungry again, but had no food left. I suggested that we pick up the mezclino and get back to town. Don Juan doesn't like these kind of suggestions. He was annoyed and made a smacking sound with his lips. He said we were going to spend the night here. We sat quietly. There was a rock wall to the left. To the right was a valley we just crossed. It extended for quite a distance, seemed to be wider than and not so flat as I had thought. The view from the spot where we sat was full of small hills and protuberances. Tomorrow we will start walking back, Don Juan said, without looking at me and pointing to the valley. We will work our way back and pick him as we cross the field. That is, we will pick him only when he is in our way. He will find us, and not the other way around. He will find us if he wants to. This is the usual mysterious, mystic way he expresses it. Don Juan, this is a religious tract. Don Juan rested on his back against the rock wall. I mean, this is not a tract for people looking to go to Cancun and party or something. This is really a spiritual discussion of a way of approaching what they consider to be spiritual things. It's quite clear. Don Juan rested his back against the rock wall and with his head turned to the side continued talking as though another person were beside myself. One more thing, only I can pick him. You carry the bag. Walk ahead of me. I don't know yet, but tomorrow you will not point at him as you did today. So he doesn't like, this childish behavior. Again, it's a matter of dignity, elegance, how you want to live. He wants a little bit of, something, and that's not taught in any particular religious tradition, although all of them may claim to teach. That's just natural. I mean, you could take a barbarian and tell him, oh, what do you admire about that person? And it'll be something, higher than ordinary. Not running after a plant the minute you see it like a child would do, not crying out. These are things that are just innate. I call them a matter of aesthetics. I don't know if you've ever seen that word and know what it means, but aesthetics is something to do with the science of beauty. Some people get it mixed up with that. What's the difference between this and this?
Aesthetics kind of like to, they endure pain for a cause of good, more or less. I don't know how to explain it. It's kind of like that.
That's already pushing it beyond what maybe the word is. Aesthetics just means looking for beauty. Maybe people who do that, that's you're thinking of a stoic because it endures pain. But aesthetic, not necessarily looking for pain.
I thought you were trying to...
An ascetic. Oh, you're talking about an ascetic?
Yeah.
Oh,
I thought that's what you were trying to define.
I want to know, yeah, an ascetic, yeah, okay. An ascetic is someone who retreats, who's living a solitary life, is willing to endure pain and other things, yeah, that's right. So most people don't understand the difference in these two words. I'm looking at a group of people here. How many of you have heard these two words before? Only half of you. And how many understood the difference between them? See, only about 30% of you, maybe 40%. That's sad, I think, honestly. I mean, I don't say that education is something that's necessary for all human beings, but you guys have gone through high schools and some kind of education, supposedly, and that they never even explained to you important concepts of that kind that you had clear in your mind. The way you have the difference between, let us say, Madonna or some other rock person or some rapper or something, it really does impress me. That somewhere along the line, people have not done their job in your high school backgrounds. You should know those words, and words like them, actually. They should be clear to you as someone who's educated. So, anyway, I'm not trying to shame you, but the fact that we do point them out to you, and they're not the only words like that, they're just the tip of the iceberg. So that's really the difference between picking picking up garbage cans on the street and, trying to deal with intellectual things, you really have to begin to feel you want to know things of this kind, and that they're innate in your mind. I mean, I'm sure along with George Bush, you'd be very comfortable not knowing, because I don't think that he can't even pronounce the word nuclear, so, but I think he does that on purpose. He purposely likes to look ignorant. He likes to cultivate the sort of West Texas barbecue manner. I'm sure he could pronounce nuclear if he wanted to, except for the fact he might be dyslexic. But doesn't seem to be able. Anyway, he's not going to change now. He's going to keep on pronouncing nuclear. What does he say? Nuclear?
Nuclear.
Yeah, nuclear. Look, don't say nuclear. That's the first mark that you know that you haven't even been to college. Not that college teaches you these things, but shows you as an uneducated person, which is why people do laugh at him. Yes.
Do you think it's so much that he chooses to pronounce that word that certain way, or do you think it's just his accent?
No, he pronounces it that way, but I think he knows better, but he's not going to change that.
Yeah, because the American people generally gravitate towards presidents that
Who are like
more
that.
common.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. He's decided to continue like that, because he knows it infuriates people like us, and he wants to put his finger in people like us' eyes in order to identify with the mass. But anyway, you are not the mass. Supposedly, it's only 20-30% of the people go to the university. So right then, you're supposed to be in the upper 20-30% of people. So you're not the mass, so therefore you shouldn't be saying nuclear. He definitely shouldn't be saying nuclear. Gone to Yale and Harvard. I mean, that really is. So he's playing, but that's all right. I'm sure he was the kind of guy that went to class and didn't pay attention, and just basically went out with the fraternity jocks and drank and things like that until he married, until he got serious. Yeah, hardly. Even not that he couldn't do better. He just didn't want to. He was just a slough-off guy. But then he met his wife, man, and she straightened him out quick. And as I've said before, if he hadn't met her, we'd be picking him up off the trash heap someplace. You might as well put her as the president, because she dusted him off and let him up there and dried him out and said, "That's it, boy. Either you stop the crap or you're gone. Your history." And he began to shape up. So awful. I'm not against him. I'm just saying that you're probably with him. He wouldn't know just in those two words either. At least he'd pretend not to. Enough about that. Aesthetics to me is the way you choose to live, because it's what you choose. I mean, frankly, you say, why don't I choose to cut someone's throat? Because I have a religious training or something? It might be the reason, but for me personally, I mean, to me it's beneath my dignity to cut someone's throat. I wouldn't even consider it. It's I don't choose to live that way. That's an aesthetic choice. I choose to live differently. Why don't I want to be a drug dealer? Really, why don't I want to be a prostitute? It could be any of those things, obviously. Anyone can do anything they want, obviously. Because you just don't choose to. If you're a civilized person and you want to live on a certain level of life, it's beneath your dignity to do those things. It's not that you can't. It's that you don't choose to. You choose not to. It's an aesthetic choice. It's a matter of taste. It's like the kind of movies you watch, or the kind of books you read, or the people you keep company with. Those are aesthetic choices. It's something in your innate sense of taste, how the clothes you wear. Those are natural things. And people who don't do those things, you already know have a problem. That there's a problem in their, they have a defect in their aesthetic taste syndrome or whatever. That's, again, I'm getting too far astray here. I'm getting too carried away with this. Let's go on here. I'm just saying why Don Juan treats Carlos in the way he does. Because this guy, it's not, again, a religious thing that we can see. His behavior is low. And how can you explain someone what low or high is? It's something you immediately perceive. You know that he's behaving beneath Don Juan's behavior level. At least from Don Juan's point of view. So the fact that he rushes, oh look Don Juan, there's the play! Should we pick it down, Don Juan? He has no dignity. Okay. So, I'm sorry, Don Juan. It's all right. You're too stupid. You didn't know. Did your benefactor teach you all about Mescalito? No, nobody taught me, Dumbo. It was the protector himself who was my teacher. The Mescalito was like a person who you talk to. The same conversation about 100 times. He does teach then. He remains silent. Remember the time when you played with him? You understood what he meant, didn't you? Oh, that's Don Juan talking. I did. That's the way he teaches. You did not know it then, but if you paid attention to him, if you had paid attention, he would have talked to you. When did you see him for the first time? He was getting really annoyed at my question. Again, I understand that, and I think he does this well. He's not afraid to show himself as a fool. Don't ask me, he said maliciously. Ask him the next time you see him. Ask him everything you want to know. Mescalito is like a person you can talk to, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. So anyway, they get ready to go down. He washed his hands and face. They filled the canteen. He handed me the canteen. I asked if we could build a fire. He really reacted like that was an inconceivable idea. He said we were that night Mescalito's guests, and he was going to keep us warm. So this is all very mysterious. So I guess the evening mist came on, and then the twilight is come on, the creek cracks between the worlds. I didn't try to ask what he meant. I lay on my stomach on the rock floor, etc., and I fell asleep. When I woke up, I heard Don Juan talking to me. It was very dark. So basically they set off in the middle of the morning night. He signaled me to sit up. He opened up his shirt, took out the leather sack, which he opened and placed on the ground in front of him. It contained a number of dried peyotes. After a long pause, he picked up one of the buttons he held in his right hand, rubbing it several times. Made a kind of Indian type cry or something. It was weird. It terrified me. I saw him place the button in his mouth. He began to chew it. So before he's going to go gathering mushrooms, as it were. He's going to chew some stuff. And I think this is pretty authentic, even if I can't be sure it happened. It sounds authentic to me. He told me to take the sack, pick out one Mescalito, put the sack in front of us again, then do exactly as he did. I did. I picked up the button, rubbed it, and chanted, swaying back and forth. I put it in my mouth, but I felt embarrassed to cry out. Anyway, again, I felt the effects of the nervous shock in my stomach. I was falling backward. I was fainting. I put the button in my mouth, chewed it. After a while, Don Juan picked up another from the sack, and he put it into his mouth after a short chant, passed it to me. So here they are doing this thing 5 times. They did this. And there was nothing, I think, to drink, or maybe there was a little, but he said, just wash my mouth out, don't drink, or I would vomit. Swished the water around my mouth, and drank away. Not drinking was a formidable temptation. Swallowed a bit of water. Immediately my stomach began to retch or convulse. Don Juan picked up another button, handed me the sack. The cycle was renewed. They did 14 buttons. By this time, all my sensations of cold, thirst, everything had disappeared. I felt this unfamiliar warmth and excitation. So again, it's pretty good. Can we go to the creek now, Don Juan? The sound of my voice didn't project out. It hit the roof of my palate, bounced back to my throat. Now he's writing this 2 weeks later. It's pretty good that he can remember all this. Echoed to and fro between them. The echo was soft and musical. It seemed to have wings that flapped inside my throat. His touch soothed me. It followed its back and forth movement, still vanished. I repeated the question. My voice sounded as though I was talking inside a vault. Don Juan did not answer. I got up, turned in the direction of the creek. I looked at him to see if he was coming. His writing has improved tremendously here. But he seemed to be listening attentively. He made an imperative sign. Abuto is already here, whatever that means. I had never heard that word before. I was wondering whether to ask him when I detected a noise that seemed to be a buzzing inside my ears. The sound became louder until it was a vibration caused by an enormous bull roar. It lasted for a brief moment and subsided until everything was quiet again. The violence and intensity of the noise terrified me. I was shaking so much I could hardly stand. Yet I was perfectly rational. Okay, and it reminded me of a science fiction movie I'd seen in which a gigantic bee buzzed its wings coming out of an atomic radiation area. And I began to perspire. I leaned towards Don Juan to tell him I was afraid. His face was a few inches from mine. He was looking at me, but his eyes were the eyes of a bee. They looked like round glasses that had a light of their own in the darkness. This is good stuff here, if it's true. It probably has some truth to it. So he makes some more sounds here, and I jumped backwards. His lips pushed out these sounds. I hit the wall. For a seemingly endless time, I experienced an unbearable fear. I was panting, whining. The perspiration had frozen on my skin. Then I heard Don Juan's voice saying, "Get up, move around, get up." The image vanished. "I'll get some water," I said after an endless moment. My voice cracked. Anyway, he realized at that moment that his fear was gone as mysteriously as it had come. Upon approaching the creek, I noticed I could see every object, and the way I remembered, I'd just seen Don Juan clearly, whereas I could hardly distinguish the outlines of his figure. I stopped and looked into the distance. I could even see across the valley. Some boulders on the other side were perfectly visible. I thought it must be early morning, but it occurred to me I might have lost track of time. I looked at my watch. It was 10 of 12. It was nighttime. I checked the watch to see if it was working. It couldn't be midday. It had to be midnight. I intended to make a dash for the water, but I saw Don Juan coming down and I waited for him, but I told him I could see in the dark. He stared at me for a long time without saying anything. Perhaps I didn't hear him. Anyway, let's see, I was absorbed in this discovery, or whatever it is here, it's pebbles or something. And then I heard before me that sound that became audible again. My muscles stiffened. Oh, cool, something like that, Don Juan says. I fancied the roar so thunderous, so overwhelming that nothing else mattered. When it subsided, I perceived sudden increase in the volume of the water. Anyway, they stayed there watching for a long time, and there was that terrifying buzzing, page 67. And then I saw Don Juan climbing and disappeared. And he hears this strange music, and then it stops. And he moves through the water, or whatever he's in, back to the soil. And in the next page, still this description of his trance-like. I mean, imagine going out in the middle of the night in this state and trying to find something, but obviously this is how Don Juan wants it done. Bottom of the next page, 68. Again, while I regained a measure of stability and stood in the dark twilight, the scene was very clear. The place where I stood was a corral formed by enormous boulders. I could distinguish another row and then another till they merged into the mountain. From among them came the most exquisite music. It was fluid, uninterrupted, eerie flow of sounds. At the foot of one boulder I saw a man sitting on the ground. Who's he meeting here now, finally? Mescalito again, I think. It was a fluid, uninterrupted, his face turned almost in profile. I approached him until I was almost 10 feet away. And then he turned his head and looked at me. I stopped. His eyes were the water I had just seen. They had the enormous volume of sparkling gold and black. His head was pointed like a strawberry. His skin was green, dotted with innumerable warts. Except for the pointed shape, his head was exactly like the surface of a peyote plant. And you're seeing a walking peyote, a Walt Disney peyote plant here. I stood in front of him staring, not very self-firing vision, I must say. I couldn't take my eyes away from him. I felt I was deliberately pressing on my chest with the weight of his eyes. I was choking, I lost my balance, I fell to the ground, his eyes turned away, I heard him talking to me. First his voice was like soft rustle of a light breeze, then I heard it as music, as melody. And I knew it was saying, "What do you want?" I knelt before him. I talked about my life. Then I wept. He looked at me again. I felt his eyes pulling me away, and I thought for a moment would be the moment of my death. I vacillated. The melody said, "Look." There was a round hole in the middle of his hand. "Look," said the melody. I looked into the hole, and I saw myself. I was very old, feeble, running, stooped over. So he has all these weird visions talking to this creature, or whatever it is, this human plant. Mescalito turned his eyes to me again. They were so close to me, and I heard them rumble softly with that peculiar sound. They became peaceful by degrees. he turned his eyes away once more and hopped like a cricket. He hops away like a cricket in the middle of the night. For 50 yards, he hopped again and again, and then he was gone. Next thing I remember, I began to walk very rationally now. I could recognize the landscapes. This one, he saw me, it wasn't very exciting encounter with Mescalito, was it? And I could do without, I'd rather maybe meet Bugs Bunny or Mickey Mouse or something, but anyway, in the middle of the night out in the Sonora Desert, this is what happened. I guess it could be pretty spectacular. And he was walking north, and I was no longer using my night vision. I remember it must be about 8 o'clock in the morning. It was 10 o'clock when I got to the ledge where I had been the night before. Don Juan was lying on the ground asleep. "Where have you been?" he asked. He said, "Did you see him?" I began to tell him what my experiences were, and interrupted me, muttering something about whether I had seen him or not. He asked how close to me Mescalito was. I told him I nearly touched him. It was about noon when Don Juan seemed to have had enough of my story. Yeah, I can imagine that's true. He told me to walk behind him, drank some water, went on. Every time we came to a peyote plant, he squatted in front of it and very gently cut, here's their gathering, the top from the short serrated knife. He made an incision level with the ground. The wound, as he called it, he sprinkled on pure sulfur powder, which he also carried in his leather sack. He held the fresh button in his left hand, spread the powder with his right hand. Then he stood up and handed me the button, which I received with both hands. "Stand erect, don't let the back touch the ground or the bush or anything," he said. We collected 65 buttons. When the bag was completely full, he put it on my back and strapped a new one to my chest. He's using him as a beast of burden. By the time we crossed the plateau, we had 2 full sacks containing 110 buttons. You know how Jesus and his apostles are swimming in the Sea of Galilee and they collect 32 fishes, or by the time they pull in the net, they have 133 fishes. Are you familiar with that scene in the Gospels? You know, ancient cultures produce these stories, and you wonder if they're all connected or not. You know, this idea of a certain amount of things that they produce or pull in as media. They do seem a bit hallucinatory, some of these things. Have you ever followed the history of the Eisenman? How many are familiar with the Eisenman? You are. Anyone else in this class know the Eisenman? You know, the guy that they discovered up in the Swiss Alps, who was frozen in one of the glaciers up there, and some tourists came along in the Alps there and found this body because the global warming supposedly is melting some of these glaciers. Anyway, this guy's lying on the ground up there in the Alps where they had never seen anyone like before up there like that, and they thought it was a murder victim at the beginning. And they took him down to Innsbruck or Austria or someplace. It was in between Italy and Austria. And they thought that they were dealing with a murder or something. And it turned out the guy was like 3,500 years old or something like that. And he was totally preserved. And he had all the clothes that he had on at that time when he died. And he had, sort of, very well dressed. I mean, the guy was very sophisticated in his outfit. He had a wonderful knife of some kind that was very highly worked. He had arrows in his quiver, really nice arrows and stuff. He had, his boots had straw in them to protect him from the cold and things like that. And he had a little pouch with little buttons in it. Whether they peyote buttons or mushroom buttons or whatever. Maybe to, like we would take penicillin or something, to ward off sickness or whatever. But he had a little pouch of this kind of thing that he was carrying. And it was clearly for medicinal or other purposes, not for, food. And I just show you that I think it's very, very widespread across ancient man. By the way, a great mystery came out of that whole thing if you haven't ever followed. It's a really interesting story. Later forensic investigation showed that actually he'd been shot in the back with an arrow. And there was an arrowhead in the small of his back. And I think there was another wound that they found on him. And it turned out that also they could tell what was in his stomach, what he'd eaten the night before, where he'd gotten that food and all that kind of stuff. And they've done a lot of good forensics on him. And it turned out I think he had a mate also that was with him. They could tell there was another guy who had been with him or something that had also been killed, or had, so they'd obviously been crossing this path in the Alps and ran into some enemies of some kind, and had a little fight there with a different tribe or a group that objected to them passing this way. And he was wounded and had wandered off from where he had been originally shot, and he fell off into this crevice, clearly, and died there. It was a really interesting story, but the main thing is to look at his paraphernalia and his equipment, and it's preserved like it was yesterday. Thus, he's telling me the ice must have been a snowstorm afterwards that covered him over, and then it became a glacier. And so he was totally preserved, just like a woolly mammoth in some of the steppes of Central Asia sometimes are. So the reason I bring it up is because it just reminds me of these guys out gathering mushrooms a little bit, or whatever they're gathering, that ancient people did this kind of thing. And we don't do it today because we go to the supermarket and stuff. But before our time, this would have been very common activity. So this is a really good picture in a way of ancient world before our world took over, it seems to me. Again, I may be overdoing that, but you'll have to be the judge of that. So he squatted and he took these things. We drank some water. We collected 110 buttons. When Peter comes in from the fishing, after he dives out of the boat or something like that, if you remember that scene in the Gospels, how many fish does he come in? They're very important to tell you. And there were like 133 or 322 fish in the net or something. And the Gospels are really intent on telling you how many fish Peter dragged in that day in his net. Of course, it would have been very difficult to swim in with a net full of all those fish, but it sounds a lot like this sort of memory that we're having presented us here. Don Juan whispered to me that the bags were heavy because Mescalita wanted to return to the ground. He said it was the sadness of leaving his abode which made him heavy, and the real chore was not to let the bags touch the ground, because if they did, Mescalita would not allow you to pick them up again. So it seemed like it was heavy, but suddenly the weight on my back and chest diminished. The load became spongy and light. I ran freely to catch up with Don Juan. I told him I didn't feel the weight at all any longer. He explained that we had already left Mescalita's abode. That was why. Now this is Tuesday, July 3rd. What was the date of this previous, which is a bit confusing, this long thing? You see, that was Friday, July 6th. So we've gone backwards 3 days. But the reason is that even though it's backwards 3 days, it's after the event. So he wrote, and I don't know why he's doing that to us, but he wrote the narration of his expedition 3 days after this event here on July 3rd. Am I making myself clear here? So this is actually coming next, even though it's dated, confused. It's dated later or whatever. I think Mescalita has accepted you, Don Juan said. Why do you say he had, almost accepted you rather? He has almost accepted me because he didn't kill you or harm you. He gave you a good fright, but not a bad one. And if he had not accepted you at all, he would have appeared to you as monstrous and full of wrath. And some people have learned the meaning of horror upon encountering him. If he's terrible, why didn't you tell me before you took me into that field? You do not have the courage to seek him deliberately. I thought it was better to not. See, he didn't tell me you were taking him out there. He said, what did he say? They were going to have to get mushrooms or something? And then at the last minute, we got him out there. He said, okay, we're going to be gathering Mescalita. But I might have died. Yeah, you might have, but I was certain it was going to be all right with you. He played with you once. He didn't harm you. I thought he'd have compassion on you. I asked him if he really thought Mescalita had compassion on me. The experience had been terrifying. I felt that I'd already died of fright. He said Mescalita had been most kind to me. Showed me a scene that was an answer to the question. Don Juan said, Mescalita, give me a lesson. I asked him what the lesson was and what it meant. He said it'd be impossible to answer that question because I had been too afraid to know exactly what I asked Mescalita. I remembered falling to my knees and confessing my sins to him as if he were in a Catholic church. Don Juan seemed uninterested in these things. Can you teach me the words of the songs you chanted? No, I can't. These words are my own. The words the protector taught me. Songs are my songs. I can't tell you. Did you see that Larry David episode recently on I don't know if you watched that guy. He's absolutely crazy to some extent, to Curb Your Enthusiasm. he had one episode where these two guys have this secret word. They're studying yoga or some other thing, and the one guy asks if he can borrow his word, you know, his mantra. I forget that he chants with this mantra, and so he gives this guy. He didn't want to give it to him, but the guy plays on his pity to give him his mantra, and then the guy is chanting his mantra, and it's doing good things for him. And then Larry David, who's the narrator, he wants it back, and the guy won't give it to him back, and they have this huge argument of, give me my word back, my life's rotten now that I don't have my mantra. And then he finally gives it, comes and he won't give it back, and then finally he does. Because someone hears him chanting this thing in Hindu or some language, and it's some curse word like screw you or something like that, and the guy punches him or something like that. You take your word back, you take your word back, I don't want your word anymore, or whatever it is. Anyway, it's quite funny. It reminds me of this little episode here about you can't have someone else's word, you have to have your own word, you have to have your own mantra, you have to have your own language. So, so it doesn't just rely on one culture. How many saw that episode that I just mentioned? Oh, you and I, right? Who else? You, me, and who else? Funny, wasn't it? You're laughing. It was good, wasn't it? I mean, you got to have a taste for that program. Yeah. It's not for everybody, is it? But, I mean, I can't watch it anymore. I've watched around 10 or 15 episodes, so they were all very funny. But after a while, it's just too much. No, I can't take them anymore, but the first 10 or 15 are good, aren't they? They really are. I mean, you sort of like, it's sort of, and this guy is the guy who did Seinfeld. He was the guy that the character George was based on, but he never got credit for Seinfeld, even though he did most of the writing and he produced it. So he kind of got, excuse the expression, pissed at Seinfeld for not giving him any, you know, not getting any, you know, public adulation and exposure, so he started his own program on cable TV, I guess it is, HBO. It's called Curb Your Enthusiasm. You can watch the back episodes if you get HBO, Curb Your Enthusiasm. And really, I mean, it's a little bit off color at times, and it's, you know, it's not for everybody's taste, but it's crazy for about 10 or 15 episodes, so you can't take anymore, right? I mean, it is really, your jaw drops open in some of the episodes. They're like that. They had them up, they had, what were those awards they just had the other day? Huh? Yeah, they had them up for the Emmys, but it's so off, you know, establishment mainstream stuff that they don't ever win in the categories, but they always come pretty close because everyone realizes it's, whether you like them or not, it's fairly genius stuff, even though it's overwhelming, isn't it? It drives you mad. But anyway, that's about not teaching someone your song or your word. Because these songs are a link between me and the protector, exactly what that episode was about. I have one episode where Larry goes to the wrong place and I think he ate the baby Jesus cookies or something like that, and the other people are angry because they baked these cookies for, what, Christmas or Easter or something like that. And he said he didn't know you weren't supposed to eat the baby Jesus and something like that. It's really quite funny. I mean, I do recommend it. It's a killer. No one is that. And he has another one where he's his mom has died and she's got a tattoo on her, so it's in a Jewish graveyard, and you know, these things are, graven images are forbidden by Orthodox Jewish law. So they find this tattoo on her, and he didn't realize his mom had a tattoo on her bum. Apparently she'd done it on a lark when she was at Atlantic City or someplace like that, and so the rabbis make him put her in, you know, bury her in a part of the graveyard that's for like sort of questionable type people, not totally, you know. So he and his friends go out at night and dig up the body, and because they know that their mom wouldn't want to be there. It's a killer episode. That's a good one. So there are a few like that that are not to everyone's taste, but and there's another one, baptism one. He really does take off on these religious. They're trying to baptize somebody, and he thinks he sees them in a river, and he thinks they're trying to drown the person. And he runs in and tries to save the guy. It's a killer. It's a killer. I do recommend it up to a point. That is, 15 episodes will do it. Okay, enough about that. So, a little bit of contemporary culture then. Let's say, if someday he accepts you, he will tell you his name. That name will be for you alone. He will either call him loudly or say it quietly, like the mantra I just told you about. Perhaps you will tell his name to Jose, who knows? What's wrong to use the name when I'm talking about him? The guy never learned. You have seen his eyes, haven't you? You can't fool around with the protector. That's why I can't get over the fact that he chose to play with you, because you're so stupid. How can he be a protector when he hurts some people? The answer's simple. You can't get anywhere with this guy. He's a protector. He's available to anyone who seeks him. But it isn't true that everyone in the world is available. Back to the old question. No, it's not true. The Allied powers are available only to the Brujos. So the Brujos can get the Allies, but anyone can approach Mescalito. But why does he hurt some people? Not everyone likes Mescalito. They all seek him with the idea of profiting without doing any work. You see, because it's more selfish and you don't want to, pay your dues. Well, your encounter is going to be horrifying. What happens when he accepts a man completely? He appears to that man as light, you see. And that's the usual light experience all mystics talk about. Whatever culture you go to, whenever people have a vision or a visionary experience, it's always light, overwhelming light, and it's the same thing here. When a man had won this kind of acceptance, Mescalito is a constant. That's obviously for Don Juan, not for you and me, probably. He never changes after that. Perhaps when you meet him again, he will be light, and someday he may even take you flying. Reveal all kinds of secrets to you. What do I have to do to arrive at that point? You have to be a strong man. Your life has to be truthful. You have to be an ordered life. What's a truthful life? A life lived deliberately. A good, strong life. Well, I think that's enough for our purposes. Is that good? I don't know what other final comments. I've made most of my comments about it. What we would expect you to do with this material and the movie we saw. I don't know. There's no right answers here. Whatever you feel you can do with it. Noel will read it, right? You're not expecting any particular thing, are you, Noel?
No.
No. You're just expecting that they say something intelligent, right? And feel that you can wrestle with the material. And yeah, all these people have to go now. We're not going anywhere. Where are all these people leaving? If you want to leave in the middle of the class or anything, we're not forcing you to come. I mean, I don't really mind if you don't come. That's a few, but it is, again, a little impolite to get up into a class and go traipsing off someplace. So do me a favor, if you're going to do that or something, unless you're going to the bathroom or whatever, just don't come that day. That's all right. We're losing sleep one way or the other. Just a certain amount of politeness and dignity is always a good thing to display. Okay, in any environment, whatever it is. I know I got a message from the tax office yesterday, and I had sent them 3 times saying I sold this boat 5 years ago, and they keep on sending me a bill for taxes for it for this year from the Los Angeles. I said, and I finally wrote the guy a nasty note, and he sent it back to me and rejected it. Now they've sent me a collection notice on a thing I haven't seen this boat in 5 years, and I consider that bad manners. Really bad manners. People that think they can just harass you until, for some unknown reason, not going to get anywhere. They just want to make trouble for others, and it's really odd. So there's good manners in every environment, classes, taxes, every place, policemen, whoever. And it seems to be in short supply as we go down this pipeline towards the defeat of terror, or whatever we're supposed to be doing. Terrorists don't have good manners, that's for sure. So, I don't have any more comments to make about that. We have a picture here of indigenous religion in the Southwest, one in a movie showing spirit life, some sort of environmental, close to the environment feeling. And here too we have the same thing, some spirit life close to the environment, very natural. One is hallucinatory, one sort of kind of touches on Christianity and other sorts of spirit feelings. The Cocopelli idea runs through much of it. I can see Cocopelli as a variety of this thing that he's encountered here in the Sonora outback, if you want to call it that. So all this is coming together in some picture of what the culture was like at one time and is probably rapidly disappearing. You people who are from similar backgrounds probably have seen your grandparents close to some of these matters in their behavior. And so it isn't totally unrealistic. So you guys will just have to write something. We'll give you a question, and we might ask you one or two identifications of things we discussed, concepts, or something that came out of the book or the movie, and that's all you'll have a test on this. Right, Noel?
Mm-hmm.
You want to add anything else? Okay.
Well, we talked about the test a lot the other day.
Oh, did you? Good, good. I'm glad you do, because tests are, I find tests boring. That's the least important part of one's activity, though I know you find it the most important part. Okay, the Bhagavad Gita. Why are we looking at the Bhagavad Gita? Well, it's another religious experience in America, non-establishment sort of activity that swept across the United States in recent times and is still functioning, particularly in upscale sort of environments where I think women in particular seem to like to go to yoga classes. I don't know if how many men are too interested in yoga. I suppose they go out and go to the gym or do some other yak it up thing. But I don't know how many of them seem to have the patience. I don't want to ask the class how many guys here do yoga, but I would think that the numbers would be 2 to 1 female over male in this activity. Women seem to find it attractive, I think, to a greater degree than men probably do. I don't know what the reason for that is. It's still with us, is what I'm trying to say. It hasn't gone away. Not that it should. I don't think it's any less valid than any other religious expression that you encounter in your environment. So I don't see any reason why we shouldn't look at it. This is the handbook. I don't know any better. I mean, I can tell you facts and figures, but facts and figures are boring and you soon forget them. And this is the handbook of yoga. It's supposed to be the handbook, the original handbook of yoga. I don't really think it is. I mean, it doesn't really tell you much about how to practice it. It seems that teachers pick up from here and interpret it in their own way and then run with it in their own manner. But this is the original handbook of it. It's a very old book. I think it goes back to about maybe about, I think your introduction tells you it's something like 200 or 300 BC, maybe earlier. I don't know when exactly Krishna, the hero of this presentation, functioned, but let's see if we have any. The introduction of this book isn't bad, and it does give you some of the main concepts that were being taught in the different types of Hinduism. For instance, you have the Vedas are mentioned in the introduction, which were a kind of priestly literature telling you how the priest class, sort of like in ancient Persia, the priest class was on top of the society. They were called Maji or whatever they were referred to as. And in India, in Hindu India, you really did have a very strong priest class. And they had very extensive purity regulations, something like the Hebrew Bible. And out of these things, certain concepts emerge that are on page Roman numeral 14 of your book. Concepts like Brahman and Atman. And he tries to define Brahman and Atman in your introduction, that is. I never have mastered these concepts, but for instance, they come out in another group of literature, the Upanishads, which are a little later than the Vedas, which are more like the sacrifice sort of instruction books. The Upanishads tend to be more philosophical. In any case, after those two versions of literature, we get this Bhagavad Gita, which is a little later in the pipeline of Hindu thought. But here he tries to define Brahman and Atman. There are two names for one truth. The two are one, like the Trinity in Christianity. You have to understand that the writer, translator of this book is a Spanish Catholic writer, and I think he brings a lot of his Catholicism into his translations. So I'm not sure you can always rely on his translations. He seems to see too much Christianity in all of this, and he expresses it in terms of Christian concepts that to make it more familiar to you. And that's why often I encourage people to have several different translations. Sometimes I bring in several different translations because we don't know the original language ourselves. Sanskrit scholars, of course, do, but we can't expect ourselves at this level, at the introductory level, to be on top of things like that. So the best you can do is compare different translations to get an idea of the different way people interpret a given term. So you'll find that the terms are interpreted pretty differently. And as we go through this translation, I think what you might see is that the words he's using, it might have better have been used Atman or Brahman or something like that, rather than some of the translations that he puts in, the translator that is, which are extremely, quote, Christian. And they may not exactly be what they might be in something like Christianity. And two names for one truth, I don't think that's exactly right. Anyway, Brahman is the oneness, the Godhead of the outer universe, the truth, as he puts it, of the outer universe. And Atman is the inner being, the inner self, but it's a universal self, not just you, but all humans, I guess, and maybe animals as well. And that's an inner sort of truth or expression. I don't know how you would put it. That's why sometimes you can't translate these two words. Om was a big thing back in the hippie days. You remember people like John Lennon or Allen Ginsberg, the poet, or they would sit around chanting Om, 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 Om. Actually, it really is a very similar Hindu word for mummy, asking for your mother. In fact, they used to group these languages together, the linguists of the 19th century, Indo-European languages they call them. One of the things they found that most of them had the same word for mummy, mother, just about, they could group them that way, really. Even Arabic and Hebrew have Ima, Om, Mom, so on, for mother. For some reason, everyone has about the same word for mummy. I don't know why that is. Om is a word similar to mummy. Don't put that on your test. It's supposed to be some spiritual word that you recite that gets you into a state of being that you can receive this knowledge. It's not so different now than what we saw in the Carlos Castaneda book in terms of being taught native southwestern plants. This is being taught the knowledge of one, of Brahman. Anyway, it's like that word I told you in the Curb Your Enthusiasm episode, the mantra word that if you repeat it over and over and over again, what happens to you? Well, if you do things over and over and over again, you get into a trance-like state. And some mystics and other groups felt that was the first step towards focusing your consciousness to get you on the path to enlightenment experience. So this chanting that either you say something over and over again, or in Islam it's called dhikr, repeat, you just keep on repeating Islamic mysticism until you get into another state of being. The Muslims also have this kind of mysticism, as I just mentioned, but they have this group that just go like this. They kind of whirl like that into a kind of a trance-like music. Have you ever seen those whirling dervishes? How many have seen in television documentaries about whirling dervishes? God almighty, where have you been? What world are you guys inhabiting? Just the one out here. Look, whirling dervishes are really wild. They just keep whirling in a circle, and they can go on for 24, 48, like those old dance fests used to have in America at these dance arenas. But they do a certain prescribed whirling, and you know, if you start whirling for about a couple of minutes, you're totally dizzy. But they don't get dizzy. They go into a trance, and then they think there's an enlightenment. And so you can do things like that. You can whirl, so you whirl yourself out of your present consciousness. A dervish is the Turkish word for mystic, a whirling mystic. In Arabic, it's a Sufi, whirling Sufi. Sufi is the Arabic word for mystic. In any case, this Om is that kind of word, and he's trying to describe it here. So Om is the name for both Brahman and Atman. Oh, I don't understand how he means that. So he's not getting a really good description of it here, but this introduction might help. So Brahman is a kind of universal truth, what we might call a god, or the god, but that's not exactly how the Hindus would see it. Now, this story, as he says here in Roman numeral 23, comes out of a work called the Mahabharata. That is, the Bhagavad Gita is a story. And it comes out of a work called the Mahabharata, which is a big epic, a Hindu epic, about a battle, an early battle, something like the Trojan War in Greek culture. Yeah. Oh, yeah, but it doesn't matter. They're all, you know, they keep changing it's the penguin, right?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
like the pages are.
Well, so I have another penguin, and they keep changing it, so you have to keep buying the new book. So it doesn't matter. You'll find it. Doesn't matter if we have the same word or not. Anyway, look for the word Mahabharata, and you'll find what page we're on. Mahabharata. Something like that. I get excited.
What is the paragraph story that you're reading?
The main story of the Mahabharata. Maybe it's a different, maybe they changed the introduction. Okay, what's the first paragraph of your introduction? The first introduction, what does the first paragraph say?
The Bhagavad Gita is...
Yep, it's a different introduction. You got a different introduction. Mine says the first paragraph. It doesn't matter, introductions, any introduction will do. Here, let's throw that away. I'll quickly sum up before you have to go, and that is that this is then after the Upanishads, after the Vedas, around 300 or 200 BC. They wrote this epic, and embedded in this epic was this story about Krishna. Now, Krishna is what this group that went across America back in the 60s and 70s, the Hare Krishnas, were preaching Krishna. And Krishna is a man-god, very similar to Jesus. In fact, I've always thought that the name Krishna and Christ are not unrelated. And many Christians who got tired of Christianity went off into this Hare Krishna group. That's why it was so popular. But I have a feeling there is a relationship. I can't prove that, and I don't think it's accidental. But Krishna is, of course, not like our Jesus stories. Jesus is so perfect and beautiful and peaceful and all these other things, though he gets angry occasionally. You know, Krishna is more man-like in his behavior. I think he likes ladies and things. Like in the cover of my book, anyway, you get Krishna. He's always presented as a blue man, and he's always sitting next to some pretty lady in veils and things like that. I don't know what your book has. So I take that to think that the Hindus felt Krishna liked ladies, where Jesus doesn't seem to like many ladies except supposedly Mary Magdalene. But I don't get any indication from the stories that he's got any special thing for Mary Magdalene. That's later tradition seems to work that out. But he is a parallel figure, and we'll stop there. And see you next time. Bring your Bhagavad Gita. Start.